All right, good evening and welcome to our event, Looking Forward, Demystifying Deep Tech with Eric Redmond. We are excited for you to join us as we open our application window to our 2021 Defense Innovation Accelerator program. Let's recognize and hear from our co-host with the Wharton Aerospace and Defense Club, Carl Fisher.
Thanks, Mike. A little bit for our guests, not from Wharton, to talk about our club. So the Wharton A&D Club was created this semester to allow students to pursue their interests in aerospace and defense, for the aerospace and defense community. And that's really broad to us, from tech to consulting, finance, general management, communication, public policy, PE and VC, primes to startups. We're really a club for the Wharton community, no matter what their interests are in A&D. And as part of that outreach, we were fortunate enough to get in touch with Mike Bynum and the team at Ensign and Fedtech. So I'd really like to thank them for putting this event on. Special thanks to Eric Redmond for joining us and sharing his thoughts on the world of deep tech, which I know is an area that a lot of our club is deeply passionate about. And finally, I'd like to thank the team from Candlelytics and Foresight for joining us tonight to talk about their experiences in the Defense Innovation Accelerator. And with that, I'll pass it back to Mike.
Thank you, Carl. Really appreciate you joining us tonight. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to quickly go through our agenda for this evening. We're going to have a great fireside chat with Eric Redmond. We'll follow that chat with a brief introduction of the National Security Innovation Network and also Fedtech. And then we'll dive into the program that we're recruiting for right now, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator. We will wrap that discussion with an alumni discussion with Foresight and Candlelytics. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Eric Redmond. He is the head of global innovation at a major sports apparel firm, a serial entrepreneur with multiple exits, and an author of the book titled Deep Tech. So Eric, welcome. And with you being a author of a book titled Deep Tech, we have to assume that you are an expert. So we're going to put you on the hot seat.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Love to be in this. I also love that picture, by the way. That was me about 20 pounds ago. So it makes me feel pretty good about myself to see.
All right, Eric. So let's kick this off with a question, which is what is your definition of deep tech? I've heard so many, but I'd love to hear yours.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's an outstanding question, because just like, you know, any term that starts to gain traction in the early days, it's not widely agreed upon. And I hope my book can help in that conversation in some way, get toward a consensus. But I mean, in short, deep tech is not about the technology. It's about the utility. It's about the end user. A friend of mine is fond of saying that we only call things robots that are unreliable. And once they're reliable, we call them washing machines. They're just a thing that do a thing that we want. And I think about that in terms of deep tech, because deep tech is sort of, we're only calling it deep tech because it's not something else. It's not, quantum computing or wherever we happen to be. It's really the raw material for disruption. A friend of mine, Josh Siegel, he's the co-founder of the MIT Deep Tech Boot Camp. I'm gonna take his definition. I'm a big fan. It says that a deep technology was impossible yesterday, is barely feasible today, and may soon become so pervasive and impactful that it's difficult to remember the world without it. Deep tech is really a reimagination of fundamental capabilities that are faithful to real and significant problems or opportunities rather than any particular discipline. So even though the book covers technologies such as AI and extended reality and quantum computing, it's not really about those technologies per se. Another way to think about it is deep tech is that phase when alchemy becomes chemistry, or when chemistry becomes better living. It's right on that tipping point. And I feel like we're at that tipping point now for a whole broad spectrum of technologies.
Oh, that's a great definition. And for you specifically, Why did this become a life's passion for you?
Yeah, you know, this is probably not a great relevant quote, but I'm going to steal it anyway because it sounded so good. So I've been watching this this biography on Lincoln on CNN right now, and he gave this phrase where he said, "My whole soul is in it." And that's kind of the way I feel about this. I mean, you know, education and innovation are two of the most reliable drivers to create a positive impact in people's lives. And I get to do both. What's not to love about this is very exciting. I mean, educating and innovating on what's coming is just my way of having an impact in the world. It just so happens that I get to play with a lot of really cool toys in the meantime.
Very nice. And with your experience in entrepreneurship, you know, and your lifelong journey with deep tech, what do you see as the trends that as we go into the future in comparison to 10 years ago?
Yeah, for sure. So 10 years ago, I mean, it was all about mobile. It was all about Web 2.0. It was all about big data. I mean, those are sort of the technical trends, the technology trends. But I think equally as interesting is that what we consider to be deep tech or high tech isn't new. It's almost always last decade's technology that's sort of slowly rolling into the mainstream. So the seven I cover in the book, and actually at the end of the book, I make very clear that these are not meant to be the exclusive list or the definitive list of technologies that are relevant this decade. Just the ones that are rolling along and mature and far enough that they can be seized for maximum impact. And those seven were artificial intelligence, which includes machine learning, deep neural networks, all of that. Extended reality, which is becoming sort of a catch-all term for virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality. And then you'll hear this term, the metaverse. It's becoming increasingly used. The next one is the Internet of Things, which are smart devices, which some of these people are just like, yeah, but we've already been working on this. Like, that's exactly the point. They're now at the tipping point. IoT is a great example of everybody's got a smart home. Everybody got an Alexa device. So many people wear smart watches. But now we're sort of at that cusp of, as an example, I think last I heard there are 13 IoT devices for every human on Earth right now. We're going to end the decade with nearly 100 per. Now, just imagine your life right now with like 100 devices just doing things for you. I mean, it's almost hard to imagine. There's, you know, it sort of unlocks this concept that's been around for a while called ambient computing. This idea that you walk into a room and the room is there for you, and it's almost like magic. You just say, hey, you know, turn the lights on, turn the TV on, or you don't have to say anything at all. It just knows based on your habits that I'm going to walk into a room, sit down, and everything's going to be available. And another one is robotics. So autonomous robotics specifically, autonomous vehicles, self-driving cars, things like that. I kind of dedicated an entire chapter to that because out of all of these sort of automated robotics, I feel like that's the one that have the broadest and most obvious impact this decade, because just imagine how cities are going to change when, you know, the average city, over 30% is used for parking. So what about a world where you just sit in a car, it takes you to your destination, and then the car drives off to pick up someone else rather than parking? I mean, that's 30% of any city space just freed up to do other things with, whether it's parks or housing or whatever. The next one, which is so funny, I'm about to name this fifth one, because I was about to take it out of the book, which is cryptocurrencies, blockchain, distributed ledger technologies. I was like this close to removing it around October, and then we just decided to keep it in. I'm glad I did, because Bitcoin goes up to $50,000 a coin. Now it's all about non-fungible tokens. You hear about NFTs a lot, sort of this idea of collectible digital assets that have value intrinsically. It's kind of coming back. The next one was additive manufacturing, 3D printing. You hear this about this quite a bit. I mean, it's just going to change the face of manufacturing. It's already starting to change the face of manufacturing. You're starting to see, and what's interesting about this is it sort of takes the automation that comes from the assembly line and allows you to create sort of unique customizable features at scale. So now everybody gets their own shoes that are made custom for their feet, for example. And then finally, quantum computers, which is kind of that's probably my biggest Hail Mary. Like if 10 years from now, like at the end of the decade, quantum computers are having this huge impact, then I can say, hey, I told you so. And if they don't, then, you know, mea culpa happens. But it's sort of interesting. I could literally spend this whole time talking about quantum computers. I'm very excited about that.
Well, with those trends, where do you see the early stage entrepreneur making the most impact? I'm pretty sure deep tech can be a little bit intimidating, but there's got to be windows for early stage entrepreneurs to make.
And more than that, and sort of the point of the book and sort of point of doing talks like this is just to make clear that you don't have to be a technologist. In fact, merely being literate about a broad range of technologies is really powerful. You don't have to be an expert, but look at the Gartner hype cycle. This is what I always tell people. People are like, what's coming next? Look at the Gartner hype cycle. Skip everything on the left side. If you're familiar, it's the one that sort of it rises up where everything is overhyped, and then it doesn't end up necessarily hitting the promises that were made, and then it drops into this thing called the trough of disillusionment, and then it slowly slopes up the slope of enlightenment, where it actually starts plateauing and becoming useful. Look at things in the trough of disillusionment. That is the best time to jump in. Don't go on the left side of the hype because it's not there yet. Definitely don't jump in at the top of the hype because you're going to pay a premium and everyone else is jumping in. You've got a whole lot of competition. People tend to just disappear once it drops off. They're like, oh, there was nothing there, and they walk away. That's exactly the time that you want to jump in because that's really when it's primed to do that hard work to bring it to market.
Absolutely. And before I go on to the next question, I just want to prompt the audience. If you have questions, please utilize the Q&A button below, and we will try to get those questions into Eric at the end. So Eric, as we recruit entrepreneurs for our Fedtech program, we are essentially at the intersection of deep tech and entrepreneurship. What sort of advice can you give someone? And again, it was great that you said you don't have to be a technologist to come in and do this, but what advice would you give someone coming into our program who's going to be paired with breakthrough technology from the Department of Defense and trying to answer the question, can we commercialize this? And if the answer is yes, they're going to stand up a company around it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, because of the literacy, the innovation really comes from the creativity. Being aware of what's possible lets you see things years ahead of other people. And so that's why I think programs like Fedtech are fascinating because, you know, the government spends quite a bit on R&D, quite a lot on development, but not necessarily for the purpose of commercializing, just for the purpose of sort of doing research. And the idea of sort of taking the outcome of that research and then turning it into a business, I think is a fantastic model. I feel like a lot of times research is done and then used for a particular use case, and then everyone just kind of goes on with their lives. And so that's sort of one aspect. The other aspect that I really think people can benefit from is, my advice is always be aware of the difference between artificial and natural barriers, right? So, you know, natural barriers are like physics or laws that probably shouldn't be broken. Artificial barriers, on the other hand, deserve to be torn down. Artificial barriers are those sort of barriers that we put in front of ourselves and say, look, this is hard, so it must be a barrier. Don't let difficulty be a barrier to going forward with a really good idea.
No, that's great advice. And also on the entrepreneur front, you've been a serial founder. You've had some exits. I'm going to assume there were some that didn't go well. As far as those that, and I call it, failing forward sometimes. Can you give some advice to those that it might not work out the first time, but getting back after it for a second or third to eventually get to, what the dream is sometimes, which is an exit?
Yeah. I mean, it statistically won't happen the first time.
Right.
I don't think that that's great advice. I think that's pay attention to math. So yeah, I've been part of 6 startups. I took 2 to funding, was an early employee on 2, took 2 to exit. And then I drove 2 into the ground. That's kind of the way I describe my 6. And that's okay. There's a lot of reasons that the first one doesn't work out. And I think in our culture, we like to say, well, you just weren't cut out for it. And there is some luck involved. There's some timing involved. There's a lot of things involved that are just outside your control. So just, go on to the next one. And sometimes, in my case, like, you said, I did a couple exits and that's great. But then, you find other passions as well. And that opens the doors, because it's not all about necessarily running a company. Sometimes it's making those connections and getting to a place that you might not have known that you wanted to be.
No, that's great. I appreciate that feedback, Eric. So on to our last question before we jump into Q&A. You've mentioned your book a few times. What can we expect from the book? What can folks in the deep tech space leverage with that book to continue learning, to get more of an idea and get back to, the title of this discussion, which is Demystifying Deep Tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's things that I've mentioned before. It's really, it's about being literate. It's about understanding the innovation is really this combinatorial creativity, this idea that it's not about the tech. It's about creative application of that tech at the right time. I mean, obviously, there's way more to entrepreneurship. It's in the book. I mean, the book's not really meant to be all things to all people, and it's not a roadmap on how to start a business or be an entrepreneur. But the 3 target audience I always say for this book are sort of top executives at large corporations that are really trying to get their head around what they see as this frightening sea change that's happened right now, just over the last couple of years. I mean, just in the last year, actually. I mean, digital transformation is accelerated by several years, and by some accounts, nearly a decade, just over the past year. The second group being technologists that are maybe experts in 1 or 2 fields, but really want to understand sort of, what do I not know? What are sort of the broad potentials there? And then finally, entrepreneurs, kind of looking for the next best thing. And at least maybe if the answer is not in the book, and by the way, every single chapter actually has a reference to other books that you can read. So if you find a topic that it's like, oh man, I'm really into this extended reality metaverse idea, it's like, great, there's a whole bibliography at the end where you can learn more.
Okay, great. Well, and what date can we look forward to getting a hold of that book?
April 13th, available at fine booksellers everywhere. There's also going to be an audio book actually shortly after. It's hard to time those right, but that'll come out a bit later.
Okay, great. I look forward to reading it. All right, so Eric, we do have a few questions, so let's grab a few of these and throw them your way. So the first question I have, so this person is asking, how does one decide whether there's a market opportunity related to the continuing research done in the lab?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That is the question, isn't it? And there's kind of 2 schools of thought about this, right? One is you find your target audience that you think might be there. handed to them like something in a nascent form, and then you check and adjust and sort of evolve your idea. Then there's sort of the Henry Ford model, which is, hey, if I asked people what they would have wanted, they would have asked for a faster horse. Maybe consumers don't necessarily know what they want. I think it's both, honestly. It's like, I think you have to believe in the conviction of your idea. And if people are necessarily saying, you know what, maybe that's not a great idea. If you really believe in it, go for it. But at the same time, you can't ignore what people want and what people need. There's actually a really great book about IoT, and he talks about what he calls the outcome economy. And he has a great quote in there. He says, you know, there's sort of this old trope that says, you know, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. But the reality is the world doesn't want a better mousetrap. What people actually want is a pest-free environment. So if you can give them that outcome, if you can give them that pest-free environment without a mousetrap, that's even better. And so, you know, that's it. Just focus on what those outcomes are, whether it's your personal conviction or what you hear from others, and try to make it real.
Great, appreciate it. Another question we have, if you could get back out there and start a company again, which vertical from your book would you choose and why?
Ooh, that is a fantastic question. I am obsessed with the metaverse right now. And I got my I got my Oculus here that I wear quite often, probably more than I should admit. Yeah, you just look at the intersection of all of these technologies. The metaverse, if you're not familiar with that term, is basically sort of the next evolution of the internet to some extent. It's sort of converging the physical and digital worlds, where, you know, there's sort of a virtual reality side to this, an augmented reality side, but there's also a side of, you know, I think the NFT, non-fungible tokens, that are going crazy right now are a part of this conversation, and saying, look, how do you own things in the virtual economy? How do things have value? What can you use with them? You know, IoT, wearables, they've got to play a role to play in this as well. And it's just this convergence of all these fascinating technologies.
Right on. All right, got quite a few questions. So what is the artificial behavior you would love to see destroyed?
I love that. Artificial barrier. Well, there's
barrier.
Yeah.
It's barrier, not behavior. Barrier.
Yeah, there's quite a few. One thing that I would love to see is more of an understanding that speed or lack of speed is inherently risky. I think especially once you get into sort of large corporations or even the government, there's this expectation that you have all the time in the world, go ahead and slow things down. We're going to spend all of this time and obsess on risk. Say, well, we're going to de-risk this, and we're going to do more research, and just instead of just putting things out there. I'm a big believer that being slow is itself a risk and needs understood in its own right. And I would consider that an artificial barrier, for sure.
All right, thank you. And for those who are new to deep tech, how would they stay up to date on everything related to deep tech? Are you going to recommend any sort of books or podcasts that folks can follow?
Yeah, well, I mean, not off the top of my head. My problem is that my knowledge stream is so curated by AI at this point. I get algorithms like through LinkedIn and my social network and Google and all of these things. That's partly how I stay. It's also my job, really, to stay up to date on these things. And I'm constantly absorbing reports, and people are texting me things. I mean, that's really my best recommendation is find friends that are smarter than you and let them filter you some really cool stuff.
Okay. I've got an interesting one here. I'll read it out. I first met you at a Google Glass meetup. I know that the product went away and VR headsets have become popular since then. Do you see more simple interface than a full headset coming along to facilitate the extended reality you mentioned?
Yes, I do. And the downside of my job is I'm bound by so many NDAs. I can't tell you anything about it, other than the fact that it is coming. It's coming, and it's probably coming sooner than you think. But good to reconnect. There were so few people willing to publicly declare that they were indeed glass holes. I wore that thing on my head for an entire year. Wow. And but honestly, it does change. It's fun. I didn't wear a watch that whole time, so every time I looked up, there was the time and date just floating out in space. Yeah, we're right on the cusp of this becoming more real for everyone.
All right, and then we've got one final question for you. How important was mentorship for you along your entrepreneurship journey? You know, how did that play a role for you?
Not even a little bit. I don't need people. Kidding, of course. No, mentorship's it's a huge important part of this. I mean, and this is what I was saying. So in my book, actually, at the end, I thank so many people and so many organizations that I actually had to trim it down because it was more than a page, which is sort of absurd for acknowledgments, because you know, there's so much going on right now, and the world is changing so fast, and it's speeding up. You've got to connect with people, especially those that just know more than you, that are experts in all sorts of things. I'm finding as I get older, I'm actually attaching myself to mentors who are even younger than I am, which is kind of a weird, like that. It's an inversion. As you get older, it's like your mentors are always older, and then they start becoming the same age, and then they kind of start going like this. You know, one of my mentors, I call, for example, Michael Kanan, who is like a Forbes 30 under 30. He wrote a book called T-minus AI. And it was really interesting. I was like, wow, I'm learning so much from this 29-year-old guy. But, you know, you can never have too many mentors.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, I'm going to let you off the hot seat. I really appreciate you coming in. This was amazing information that you've provided. We absolutely need to stay in touch as we kick off our program in May, and would love to have you involved if you have the bandwidth.
Yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate you guys having me, and they were great questions, and yeah, I look forward to staying connected.
All right, Eric. Thank you. I appreciate you. All right. So that was a great discussion with Eric Redmond. We are now going to move over and discuss the National Security Innovation Network and also Fedtech. All right, so we're going to bring on Robin Brazil, and she's going to talk about National Security Innovation Network.
Yep, thanks, Mike. Hi, everybody. So it's great to be here. So I was lucky enough to be part of the last iteration. I'm working with Mark Anthholt, who's going to join you. Mark Antholt's going to join you right now. And he's going to be able to share a little bit more about Ensign. But before we get there, just want to thank everybody again for being here today. So Mark is here, so we'll just give him a minute to join, and he'll be able to come on and tell you a little bit more about the National Security Innovation Network and the DIA.
Hi, my name is Mark Antholt. I am the Ensign Program Manager for DIA. So I'll just tell you a little bit about Ensign and about the DIA program, then I'll turn it back over to the Fedtech guys and let them go into a little bit more detail. So the National Security Innovation Network, we are a DoD organization. We're in the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. And we were established in an effort to help the DoD build a network of innovators that can help solve national security problems. And we were founded on this realization that the innovation that's driving the world today is not being driven by the Department of Defense like it was 20 years ago. It's being driven by entrepreneurs and the startup community and academia. And if the Department of Defense wants to stay on the cutting edge of technology, we really need to be able to tap into these resources. The Department of Defense does a really good job of engaging with the defense industrial base, these big companies that have been around for a long time and have the infrastructure to work with the DoD. But the DoD is not typically very good at working with startups and entrepreneurs and academia. So Ensign was established to try to change that, to try to establish mechanisms for entrepreneurs such as yourselves to work with the Department of Defense, because we know there's a lot of you out there that are really excited about what you're doing, and you also are looking for ways to help serve your country, to provide value to the Department of Defense, and we want to be able to tap into that. So that's why the National Security Innovation Network was established. We have 3 portfolios of programming that we provide to the Department of Defense. One is called National Service. And this is, when I say national service, I mean, these are ways for people who want to serve their country, but don't necessarily want to join the military or become a lifelong DoD employee. They want to do something. So we find alternative pathways for them to provide value to the Department of Defense. The collaboration portfolio is, they're about creating these collision events between academia and the startup community and the Department of Defense. So we have things like hackathons. We have a university program called Hacking for Defense, and it's really bringing together all these different experiences and these different people. And we find that there's truly a lot of innovation, a lot of new ideas that come out of such events. And finally, the acceleration portfolio is there to really provide new startups, new ventures with the tools that they need and the opportunities they need to establish a foothold within the Department of Defense, and try to level that playing field a little bit. It's really skewed towards the big companies and the defense industrial base, but we're trying to level it some so that you guys have a fighting shot at establishing a business line with the Department of Defense. So you can go to the next slide, please. So I guess, should I talk about DIA now, or do you want to talk about Fedtech first and then go back into DIA in specific?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and talk about Fedtech, and then we can go into DIA. So Fedtech, what we're doing is we're building ventures around breakthrough technologies. We're doing this in 4 verticals. So first, we've got the startup studios, which the Defense Innovation Accelerator falls in, where we're bringing in entrepreneurs with technology and forming companies around it. And I'll dig a little bit deeper later into the presentation. We also have accelerators for later stage companies that are already in market and are looking to acquire business with the Department of Defense. We've got a rather robust accelerator program with the Army right now, and as well as one with Oak Ridge Labs. We also work with companies teaching classes for internal innovation. So we go into organizations such as the VA, DISA, and MITRE, and stand up classes for them to better facilitate entrepreneurship within their organization. And then last, we have corporate venture, where we have corporate partners that we act as a tech scout for them as they look for technologies within DoD to further initiatives within their organization or solve issues outside of it. So now we'll chat a little bit about the Defense Innovation Accelerator. Mark, did you want to jump in? Do you have a few words?
Sure. I'll just start it off. So, like Mike said, Fedtech has been providing this program for a while, where it matches up DoD inventions with entrepreneurs who want to form a new business, and they've been supporting the National Security Innovation Network for about 5 years. But last year, Ensign said to Fedtech, hey, we want to create a program that's tailored to the Department of Defense. And we want to bring Ensign's unique capabilities to bear to make this a better program. And so we established DIA. So essentially DIA is Fedtech for the DoD. However, we're bringing a lot to the table, the Ensign organization. We have a regional structure. We have regional directors all around the country that are tapped into their ecosystems, the venture communities, and the DoD customers in their ecosystems. And so what we're doing is we're leveraging that network to bring a lot of DoD customers and DoD end users that understand the problems that the DoD is facing into these cohorts, so that if you join one of these cohorts and you establish a team around a DoD technology, you're also going to have access to some of the end users and customers that would be eventually using a capability that hopefully you'll be able to help develop. And so they're going to give you a lot of insight into what those use cases are, what the real needs are. And is something that's really invaluable to entrepreneurs, having that insight into the customer's thinking and the customer's requirements. So that's one of the big things that we add to this program. But essentially, it's a Fedtech program. And so the guys at Fedtech, they're running it. They know the nuts and bolts of it. So I'll hand it back over to them and they can talk a little bit more detail about the program itself.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your time this evening. All right, so as Mark was stating, we'll dig into the nuts and bolts as to what the DIA program is all about. It starts with the breakthrough technology. We're bringing in IP from the DoD, and then we're also bringing in entrepreneurs who are looking to start a business. Those two are aligned with the greater DoD mission, which number one is ultimately advance the technology to help the warfighter down the road. But number two, the DoD would like to engage more with the startup space, with the entrepreneurship space, as Mark was alluding to earlier. So this DIA program is at the intersection of these three parallels. So I just want to go over time commitments by role for our program. So along with the technology that comes into the program, that technology's inventor comes along as well. So they spend about an hour a week through our two-phase program. Next, we have the entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs come in and spend about 20 hours a week between phase 1 and phase 2. And the way that this program was designed is so that you can conduct this program and also have a full-time profession. Next, we have mentors. So along with the inventor, we're going to surround the entrepreneur teams with mentors and coaches to further facilitate, number one, answering that question, hey, can this piece of technology be commercialized? And if yes, then how do we form a company around it? And last, we have advisors that are more on call or mentor office hours. And these are the subject matter experts that vary in functional area from marketing to finance, operations, and funding. So we have a two-phased approach. Phase 1 is where we're using the lean startup method to answer the question, which is, can this piece of technology be commercialized? We're bringing in 22 technologies, and we're going to have a total of 22 teams, which is going to be a total of 64 entrepreneurs that are going to participate in this program. It's heavy on stakeholder interviews. Mark alluded to it earlier. That's where the National Security Innovation Network comes in, where they're leveraging the regional network teams to bring in not only potential commercial customers, but also potential DoD customers for those interviews. Then there's phase 2. If the answer to the question in phase 1 was yes, we can in fact commercialize this technology, we want to stand up a company around this piece of technology, you will then basically do an internal pitch into phase 2. And what we do in phase 2 is leverage all of the assets that we have to help you form a company. Along with that, we're also pushing you down the road of getting that technology licensed to your business. So that's a big part of phase 2. Phase 1 is approximately 6 weeks, so we'll kick off mid-May and end in June. And then phase 2 will be 10 weeks. That'll go from July to September. So what are we doing now? We're sourcing IP. We're speaking to multiple labs, multiple inventors, And again, we're not only bringing the technology, we're also bringing the inventor along for the ride as well. We're also recruiting entrepreneurs as well. We'd like to have each team have 2 to 3 entrepreneurs each. And we're also recruiting mentors. So again, we will surround each team with a coach, additional mentors, and then access to advisors. And last, we're building strategic partnerships, and that starts with the National Security Innovation Network. We want as many of the regional network teams to get involved as possible as they span the entire country. They have relationships with multiple universities, multiple labs, and ultimately multiple customers for these companies. So phase 1, a lot of pitch practice, a lot of breakout sessions, and we also have lectures as well, which you'll see in your traditional accelerators. But where we really differentiate is the stakeholder interviews. Again, we're starting off from scratch, so we have to answer that question, you know, is there a way for us to commercialize this? So it's heavy on stakeholder interviews. And last is the Fedtech ecosystem. I mentioned it, and I'll keep mentioning it. The National Security Innovation Network, the regional network teams, bringing in potential DoD customers, bringing in potential private sector customers for these interviews to answer that question. And then there's phase 2. So we've answered the question, yes, we can commercialize this technology. Our team, we want to form a company around this piece of technology. The learning becomes customized. We get individual coaching involved. We have founders forums, which is essentially the founders to your left and right, working with each other, sharing each other's issues as really it's a tough mission to start a business from scratch. But you know, who better to learn from than those to your left and right who are also doing it. And we also have what we call accountability councils. So it's essentially like having an advisory board, a mock advisory board, to mimic what you will see as your company grows down the road. And last is professional services, which is probably the most important one. This is where we're bringing in legal, we're bringing in folks that are familiar with the SBIR process, marketing, software, those things that you need to get your startup off the ground, whether it's, you know, creating a logo or standing up a website. We're able to leverage a lot of those services to help you get along. So a few outcomes from 2020. We had 12 total teams go into phase 2, and 83% of those formed into a company. 8 of those teams were able to get into what we call a cooperative research and development agreement, or go down the line of licensing the technology. 8 of those have won grants as well. Up to $10,000 have been won already. And then the most important part are the folks that we bring along for the ride as far as mentors and coaches and advisors. Out of 5, the rating was 4.75. So everyone was extremely pleased. I want to highlight a lab, the Army Research Lab, that also has participated with Fedtech since 2018. And since then, they've provided 13 technologies. There's been 4 cooperative research and development agreements formed, 4 awards, and 2 of their technologies are currently being negotiated for licenses. So that's just an example of one of the labs that participate in this program. All right, so I've talked a lot, so I want to bring on some folks that have actually been through the program and let you pick their brain. So a quick reminder is to use the Q&A button below so that we can get these questions to these founders. So without further ado, I'm going to bring on the first team, which is Candlelytics. So we've got Brian Lee and James Parker. And then our second team is Foresight. And we got the Mike and Mike. So we got Mike Wilson and Mike Sieper. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us, Mike.
Appreciate you being here. So I'm going to lead out with this question, and starting with Michael and Mike with the Foresight team. Why did you choose to participate in the DIA program?
Well, I'll tell you, I initially started I started in the military, and I was a defense contractor for a long time, and I've been working in government technology for a long time. And I wanted to start my own thing that gave back to that community. So I started a mental health tech company really at the perfect time in January of 2020, right before COVID hit. And I lost my engineer, I lost the doctor I was working with, and I lost my co-founder that had to take jobs. The doctor had to take, was involved in COVID. So it initially burned out and failed. And I realized I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. And I was turned on to Fedtech because I know I wanted to meet that challenge kind of upstream and learn about starting a business and a company that could give back to the community that I was a part of. And I found that in the DIA program, and it's just been an incredible journey since. So I'll turn it over to Mike to kind of, he can hit on his motivation.
Thanks, Mike. And I'll just share that it's been a pleasure working with Mike throughout this process. We were able to get paired up through DIA and have been able to advance this technology. What excited me about this opportunity was I help lead innovation and entrepreneurship at Washington University in St. Louis. So it was my opportunity as an entrepreneur, which I've been doing for over a decade, was to see some really innovative technology. I've always wanted to be able to support veterans, but also the warfighter that is still out in the field. And I thought this would be a great way to be able to commercialize new technology that was on a shelf in a lab, and we could help get this and advance this to commercialization to get to the warfighter. And from my perspective, I always thought it was really interesting watching James Bond movies. Whenever he'd go and see Q and he would have these cool inventions and these things that he could roll out was the most cutting edge thing. To me, this program was that peek behind the curtain. This is to see what is being developed before anyone else. And it was a tremendous experience with being able to see all the different technologies and select which one we gravitated to. And we have had a great pleasure to be able to see Candlelytics working through their process. And it's just been really exciting to be able to work with everybody as a cohort through this model.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate those answers. Moving on to Brian and James with the Candlelytics team. What were your expectations coming into the program?
Yeah, I can hop in first, Mike. I think the first expectation was similar to what Mike mentioned, is that like you have an opportunity to build something that is impactful, and it's impactful to a community that I personally still hold very near and dear to my heart as a military veteran. And James and I are both student entrepreneurs. So we're in school right now, like maybe some of the MBA students on this call. Another point of expectation was just the opportunity to learn by doing, right? James had a little bit of entrepreneurial experience before. I had not. I was coming from transitioning from the military. And like when it comes to startups, like having the opportunity to learn by doing is the best way to learn. Another aspect that I think the program brought was kind of an ability to de-risk experimentation, right? So in many ways, like the program is built around, the typical work schedule. James and I both were doing our MBA internships when the cohort first kicked off. So that fit into our schedule. And at the same time, kind of that phased approach allows you to test hypotheses and really test kind of some of those important null hypotheses before you make the leap into, hey, should I form a company? Am I going to be dedicating more time to this? And the last thing that I'll say that I think was a source of attraction for me with the DIA program is that I'm coming from a non-technical background, right? And the fact that the program is tailor-made to pair entrepreneurs, people who are excited about being entrepreneurial, with technology that's in some ways already been dedicated to, already had like R&D funds dedicated to it, was a really big benefit, because I knew that I had something to fall back on, something that worked, something that was real, and something that was designed to do a job. And it was just my role to kind of look at expanding that and imagining other uses for that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Apart from kind of what Brian has said, that like you mentioned, I was also a student, had a little bit of experience working at a small venture before co-founding. However, I don't come from a military background, but I do come from a technical background in defense. So I had worked previously at a contractor prior to school doing wireless tech for the intelligence community. And there, also developed, again, just a real passion though for supporting those defense flavored, national security flavored missions. I feel like it's a very rewarding career that I think is also, just speaking as, as a younger engineer, right, is often, I think, under advertised to young people in technology as a source of a lot of fulfillment when it comes to career. So I always knew I wanted to reconnect with that group after school. I'm in a very, as part of my program, I'm in a joint degree program that has an entrepreneurial focus. However, one of my expectations coming into the Fedtech program was, again, the ability to work with the quality people, right, that I had come to love and appreciate working in my prior sector, as well as kind of practice what I think is a different flavor of entrepreneurship, and that is almost kind of entrepreneurship in reverse, right, where oftentimes, the approach to entrepreneurship is you go find the problem and then you invent the solution. This was also an opportunity to kind of work that problem a little bit in reverse, right, where you have a capability and you are looking for another application, right, where that technology can fulfill a need. So again, another opportunity to just practice, those different muscles. And speaking, having worked just in the technical side prior to this was also a great way for me to get experience interfacing directly with defense DoD customers, talking to operators, understanding kind of what the perspective is like from the boots on the ground. And sometimes as an engineer, some of that was abstracted from me. So again, the DIA program really brought together, I think, the best from interacting directly with customers all the way up to kind of like thinking high level strategic and forming a business. Just a great sampling of all aspects of the business.
No, that's great feedback, James. And before I move on, I just want to tell the audience, please use the Q&A button to submit questions, and we'll get those in here towards the end. I want to throw a little bit of a curveball at you all. I want you to give us your elevator pitch for what your business is and what it does. Let's start out with the Candlelytics team so that the audience knows what you all produce from this program.
Yeah, I'll take that one, James. We've gotten quite a bit of practice, but Candlelytics is a LiDAR 3D analytics startup, and we're harnessing the power of 3D data. And what this means is that we're building the digital tools that will make complex 3D data accessible, intelligent, and impactful, specifically for operators at the tactical point of need. We've decided to start with a very specific use case, and that's transforming the way maritime law enforcement agencies like the US Coast Guard conduct interdiction operations on the high seas.
That's great. Foresight.
Yeah, Foresight is a wireless power transfer software company that is operationalizing wireless power transfer for unmanned systems in the current landscape. And we're doing that through our partners who are making the wireless power hardware and integrating that into various systems for operational use in the DoD landscape.
Very nice. And staying with the Foresight team, can you explain your experience in phase one and just that moment where you decided, hey, this can be commercialized and we're going to form a company around this tech?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was pretty daunting at first. You have 22 technologies to choose from, right? And for me, seeing wireless power as it applies to the battle space provides a whole transformative ecosystem for the tactical use of that. Imagine, being in an austere environment, going back to your patrol base and not having to plug in any of your flashlights or radios or tablets you know, you just walk on base and it just starts charging, or it starts charging when you get into your truck. Or you have drones that can only fly for 23 minutes, and now they can now charge above a truck, or in a mobile scenario, or above a static patrol base position. That can now save lives. The more intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance you have, the more that you're able to react to an adversary ahead of time. And that is what I saw in that initial list, because the inventors provided enough information that you could conceptualize where you could take this. And it was one of those things that, working with the scientists from Crane, you could see their vision too, and it's a very collaborative environment. And they were of a similar mindset, having direct, you know, actionable testing with the DoD. Luckily, our technology was a little bit further ahead in its readiness level. So we were able to take what they started as a foundation and build upon it. And it's been a journey, because their software was written in MATLAB code. So in order to commercialize it, we had to change the code and bring that into a cloud-based environment where we can make it more accessible to end users. And what we're doing now is taking that on-premise environment, incorporating more data sets and more you know, actionable implementation mechanisms to make it real in real time, and leveraging it so warfighters have the information when they need it. They know that their assets are being charged in real time because they can see it and it's tangible. And it's a real way that we can take something to inform a broader intelligence integration mechanism by taking the energy you see on the battlefield and putting that into a common operating picture to see the whole battle space, from your drones to your tablets to your, you know, your smart grids eventually, and leveraging renewables and bringing that all in to see your energy fuel, you know, in a way that you can make command decisions. It's just been an incredible process, but a daunting one to say the least.
No, that's great. Great to hear that one. Mike, you had a input there?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little bit about how this program gave me the opportunity to explore a new problem. So there's always the issue that you'll encounter if you are the inventor of something, that you fall in love with the idea, the invention, without knowing if it solves the problem. This, and I think James touched on it, gives you a unique perspective to know the technology and be willing to explore and to be able to know if it's a right fit before you take that next step. So Mike and I were very dedicated from early on in this program, and we were moving fast. So you asked about phase one, Mike. That was something that by the end of phase one, we had already formed a company. So that's how much we believed in this product and what we were trying to do to commercialize this. We were dedicating significantly more time than maybe what was expected, because we wanted to be able to advance this beyond just an idea to a technology, to a company, to somebody that can advance this to the warfighter. And we saw this as a calling to be able to move quickly. And we've been able to make tremendous progress, both in phase one, phase two, and now that we've completed the program with the additional help of Fedtech. So we're very grateful for all of the support that we've received at this point.
No, in my old world, Mike, that we call that high speed. So that's good. I appreciate that. Hey, and on to Candlelytics. Same question. At what point in phase one did you decide, hey, we're going to form a company around this technology?
Yeah, I think I think one of the things that again, phase one is hopefully designed to help you figure out is whether you found kind of the problem solution fit, and I think that takes a variable amount of time, right? Depending on the team. Sometimes you are able to kind of converge to that to a problem right away, and sometimes it takes you a little longer. I think with us, you know, you know, coming in, we had a slightly different idea of what exactly our technology did, and so as we got further in and explored the technology more, there was an understanding that we were going to have to adapt some of our expectations and kind of approach kind of a solution from, you know, an angle or a vector we hadn't expected, and that was okay. I think with the help of our mentors, we realized like we could pivot and find additional ways to apply this 3D LiDAR technology. And I think with us, when we decided to form a company, was honestly just having enough customer conversations that we realized the pain was so severe, right, that there was no way we could not do this. And in particular, you know, we explored a couple of different things, you know, from 3D printing to AR, VR, and also kind of the Coast Guard's use case, which is the one we've decided to take on here. But when you hear a Coast Guard operator describe, right, the manual process by which, right, they currently collect intel on a vessel, the backbreaking work, the strain of measuring and the tediousness of measuring compartments room by room with a measuring tape and pencil and paper. At that point, right, we were certain we had found something painful enough that it was worth pursuing. And of course, we didn't have all the answers in phase one, but we felt like we had enough to go on that it was worth driving forward on this problem through phase two. So I'll let Brian add on to that.
Yeah, I think that was a really great encapsulation, James. I think the bottom line is, you know, it was not a straight line to get from the beginning of phase one to the end of phase one. We had two like very significant pivots, but I think we pivoted at the end of phase one to the use case that James just described. And we realized as a team that this was a use case and an application of the technology that got us up in the morning. Like, it motivated us to work. And like, we knew going into phase one, if we were going to form a company into phase two, like that workload was only going to increase, but we were excited for that to happen because we wanted to start building.
No, those are all great answers. I appreciate that feedback. And before we get to the Q&A for both Candlelytics and Foresight, can you just give us some updates as to what's been going on since you've completed the DIA program, and we can stick with Candlelytics and then move on to Foresight?
Yeah, so it's been about, I think, 3.5 months since we had our demo day. A lot has happened on the Candlelytics front. We secured some grant funding from MIT's Innovation Fund. We formally established a cooperative research and development agreement with the Naval Information Warfare Center Lab, our partner lab. We conducted 2 live demos with Coast Guard units in San Diego and Miami, where they allowed us to board one of their 87-foot cutters and scan it as if it were a smuggling ship. And we also were able to debrief some of the Coast Guard leadership. We've grown our team from 3 to 7, and we've been finalists for a string of pitch competitions that we're really excited about. The most recent of which had us pitching Kevin O'Leary of Shark Tank fame this past weekend.
Wow, that's amazing. Good job, guys. All right, and Foresight.
Yeah, Foresight has come a long way too. We've had a friends and family round where we were able to secure $100K in funding, and then we've also had some investment with some grants as well. We've formalized 3 corporate partnerships so far. We have a cooperative research and development agreement with the Navy. We are looking at formalizing some hardware partnerships for integration purposes to include drones as well as transmitters and receivers to integrate into our software. We are navigating a seed round right now, and we have 3 interested investors, which is exciting. We have a invite-only demo with IndoPACCom coming up this summer. We'll be going out to Hawaii and demoing our software and hardware integration. And our beta will be done in another week, which is also pretty exciting to be able to start demoing that for potential end users and iterating on top of what we've done so far. So pretty exciting since we've left the DIA program, and excited on where we take this further, for sure.
No, congratulations to both teams. Those are amazing updates, and just to think you stood this thing up from scratch a year ago. So congratulations to both of you. So we're going to go ahead and jump into some Q&A, and for this question, feel free to jump right in there, either team. But the question is how do you think about the regulatory environment and potential legislation as you are developing these technologies?
Hey guys, I'll take this one if you want. Because you're sending energy through the atmosphere, FCC is involved quite a bit. And what we see as an opportunity for the software is the safety compliance mechanism built into the software that allows you to see the electromagnetic radiation built in. So as you're charging, you can see it on your tablet or your phone as that radiation and the standoff distance from that charging capability. We're also working with drones, as is the Candlelytics team, I'm sure, on some level. With LiDAR, and the FAA is involved, and the way that we're looking at policy and legislation is really becoming smart on it, seeing who those stakeholders are, looking at the Hill and who are on those regulatory bodies and who has influence, because the truth of the matter is that wireless power in probably the next 2 years you're going to be able to walk into the mall and your phone will start charging. So this is a technology that's coming, and I'm not sure if any policy or legislation is going to hold it up for very long. So we need to start that conversation with those policymakers and legislators currently, and that's what we're doing. We're engaging the Hill and others at this point. Sorry, Brian.
I'll add a little bit to that. So we've also done some congressional engagement as well. But I want to kind of bring it back to the importance of kind of that understanding the pace of regulation change, right? And I think this goes back to Eric's previous point, where like going slow is a risk in itself. So one of the use cases that we dug in very deeply before making our final pivot was 3D data as it relates to additive manufacturing. And we were like really, really deep into this use case. But it quickly became clear to us that at least within the DoD, the regulatory environment for using 3D printed parts for anything more significant than just like kind of battle damage replacement was not really going to be forthcoming. So I think like when you think about innovation in a general sense, usually innovation happens when the market timing and the technology timing meet, right? Within the DoD and other highly regulated environments, you have the market timing, the technology timing, and the regulation timing. And unless all three of those are kind of in lockstep, it's very difficult to get anything moving. So I think that's definitely a valid consideration and a great question.
No, great answers, guys. And another question that we have, which is very relevant, is how did you all tackle the challenge of working with your inventors, and specifically for those of you that don't have a tech background, how did you navigate that piece?
I can jump in on that one first. We had an opportunity to work with some fantastic inventors that were very dedicated. If you think about it, this is something that they've spent years trying to develop, and it was something that they cared deeply about. And they were excited to be able to have entrepreneurs that had a passion and an opportunity to be able to bring this to the market. So this is something that they saw in one way that solved a problem within their community. And so our opportunity was to broaden that community to help the warfighter, to expand this in wireless technology practitioners, people that are doing these calculations and being able to streamline that, which hopefully our software will be able to allow, as Mike mentioned, the wider adoption of this technology. Because if we can get this into the hands of the right people, this can accelerate the process, and we can serve as an intermediary and a backbone for this new wireless power economy that is going to take off and open up new opportunities for charging through areas that we'd never seen completely wirelessly.
I can go next. So with yeah, in terms of, so I'm going to answer this, even though I do have a tech background. In terms of like what advice I would have if you don't have a tech background, and then just kind of like other things that we've come across with working with our inventor. So even if you don't have a tech background, I would say that one of the benefits that you as the entrepreneur bring to the table, right, is the benefit of kind of also bringing a different perspective or higher level view of the technology. I mean, the amount of interviews we did during phase one, I think it was, you know, in the hundreds, allowed us to get an industry perspective that just would have been impossible, right, if you were the chief, you know, scientist or inventor, simply because your time is devoted to developing the technology. With that said, also, right, sometimes you are going to be, as the inventor or the lab, right, you're going to be so focused, right, on a particular use case that you may just not have, you may just not have the time or the focus to be able to see what those adjacent use cases are. So just because you're not technical does not mean that you cannot bring great value into being able to talk about that technology at a higher level. And this I think sometimes involves asking the lab or the inventor to talk about the technology in a different way than they're used to. So talking in terms of what does it do, right? Rather than like the technical details of how is it implemented, oftentimes like elevates kind of the subject to a level where you can start to see those other applications. So that's one way I think in which, you know, non-technical folks as well bring a lot of value here from that high level perspective. In terms of just like working with inventors from a technical standpoint, if you don't have that background, you know, the DIA program provides you with a wealth of mentors and coaches who, in our case, several of our coaches would join us for inventor calls. If you don't have that technical background on your team, I would suggest that you choose coaches or mentors who can provide some of that flavor to help you through some of those conversations, navigating those conversations. But that would probably be my advice there. Overall, great people to work with in our labs, both from the inventors and their supporting team.
No, that's great feedback. I appreciate that, James. And sticking with James and Brian, there's a question here about doing this while you're in your MBA program. How did you do this with your timeline? Did you start the company in your first year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So James and I were in between our first and second year. So DIA, the first cohort of DIA kicked off in like June, July timeframe. So we were both in our summer internship. And I think in September, when school started, was when we rolled into phase two and formally incorporated the startup.
Okay, great. And last question I have for both teams. What do you think makes someone successful in Fedtech Startup Studio program?
I'll just say commitment. Commitment in the belief of your technology and where you can take it yourself with your teammate. And it's one of those things where you're paired up with someone you don't really know in the very beginning. And I think you build off of each other's skills, hard and soft, and work together to formulate a solid strategy that you think will be a market fit, but will also impact the community at large. And I saw a question in the Q&A that was based off of like, does this have commercial use? And a lot of these, they do have dual use. And when you start to get into the conversations in Fedtech about SBIR funding and non-dilutive grants and things like that, they often want you to be able to apply this to a commercial use case. So it's important that you're looking at this from those perspectives of what somebody else brings to the table that might not have a background in tech. They might not have a background in defense, but they might have a background in a commercial use arena that could benefit the technology that you're looking at. So I think those things is working off of your teammate and constantly being committed to the mission, I think is what will make you successful.
I would just simply add, just being humble through the process and willing to learn. You're going to be paired up with amazing inventors that have technology they've invested years on. So just come in open-minded and wanting to conduct the interviews as was mentioned, because that's where the learning is happening. There's nobody that's making you do these classes. There's no one making you take those next steps to commercialize this. You have to believe in it enough to dedicate your time both through this program and after the program to something that you want to see succeed. And so it's been a pleasure to be able to work through this and develop something that we truly believe in, to have a great partner that you're working on commercializing this with, and to think of the people that you can help, that if you do your job to the best of your ability, that you can change the landscape of the battlefield of commercial applications and the impact that you can have through commercializing a technology. And it's been a tremendous experience, and looking forward to all that lies ahead as well, because we're not at the finish line yet. We have a long way to go.
Yeah, I think I'll kind of echo Mike's sentiment in that, especially in phase one, I think what makes you successful is knowing that you're going to get out what you put in, right? Because especially in phase one being so customer discovery centric, like you're not going to be able to have multiple pivots and be set up to start a company unless you've done a robust amount of those customer and market discovery calls. So you know what's out there. So you know what's in the realm of possibility. Another way that I think among the successful teams I saw, I guess going the extra mile and putting in more than and getting that same return on investment is like making use of the DIA network, right? So like as a DIA team, you have your own assigned mentor and assigned advisor. But there's also 24 teams with their own mentors and advisors. I can't tell you how many times, just through a cold email or through a Slack message, like we found someone within that Fedtech DIA network that had an expertise that we thought might be valuable, had a perspective that we thought might be valuable, and like leveraging more than just who you're assigned and really making use of that network.
Yeah, I think maybe the only way I'll maybe rephrase it here is that every successful startup needs a hipster, a hacker, and a hustler. But and I as the tech guy, I tend to want to be the hacker on that in that equation. But I can tell you for phase one, the hustle matters. That's what counts for phase one. There's just like an incredible amount of like emails and interviews that you have to do in order to find that use case. And so like, don't underestimate the amount of work, I guess, that and dedication that it does take to do that homework. So I think at various times, like in the startup cycle or a timeline, various of those, the visionary, the implementer, and the hustler or the operation, right, matters more at certain times. But certainly during phase one, it's just got to be a lot of research and homework to try to understand ecosystems, understand the hierarchy of the customer, their purchasing, their purchasing habits, the struggles that operators have, the incentives that their commanders have. there's a lot of research to do. And so again, just as much as possible, leverage, as Brian said, leverage the DIA network to get you those connections, and just don't underestimate the amount of how much putting in that initial work to find those niches will pay off in the long run when it comes to finding a sustainable problem to solve.
All right, that was great input from all of you all. Brian, James, Mike, and Michael, you're officially off the hot seat. I just want to thank you all for coming out, and let's stay in touch as we kick this thing off in May. Would love to have you back and be guest speakers to the next batch of entrepreneurs that go through this program.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it for sure.
All
yeah,
right.
thanks to the whole DIA team.
Thank you.
And for all the A&D club members, we will make sure we post all the pertinent information in the Slack channel. So timelines and all those things will be in the Slack channel after we're done here.
Good deal. So how do we get involved? You've heard from some great guests today, starting with Eric Redmond, who said, hey, you don't need to have a tech background to jump into deep tech and make some good things happen. So what we're going to suggest, and we've got the link in chat, is apply for the program and take the challenge. You heard from entrepreneurs today about their experiences working with the inventors, and then ultimately making a decision to start a company. It's not an easy decision, but like they said, the work you put in, that's what you're going to get out of it. So I'd love for the folks in the audience today, if this is a challenge you want to take on, please do apply. Again, the link is in chat. I've got some contact information here, dia@ensign.us, and then also my email, michael.bynum@fedtech.io. You can add me on LinkedIn, Mike Bynum. I'll talk to anyone. So please ping me. Let's sit down and talk and see if this program is for you. So without further ado, I'm going to say a few thank yous here, and then we're going to close out. So Eric Redmond, I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing your insights, about your journey, your exits, the failures, and now writing a book. Wharton A&D Club, Carl, thank you very much for co-hosting with us. National Security Innovation Network, Mark Anholt, appreciate you jumping on and talking about Ensign. And then Candlelytics and Foresight. It's better to hear it from you than me. You all went through the program. You are now founders of startup companies, and I think that's a huge achievement. So props to you all for everything that you're doing. So we will send out a post-event survey. We'll send out an email as well that's got the link to the application, but please do connect with me, and I hope to see you in our DIA 2021 program in May.